I'm here talking to the team from Us versus Them. So please just introduce yourselves and tell us what your role was in making this film.
So my name is Charlie Grady, and I'm one of the producers and narrators and writers of the film Us versus Them.
My name is Jeremy Brewer. I'm a retired police officer of 20 years in the state of Connecticut, and my role was of the retired police officer.
My name is Ameer Williams. I am currently a New Haven Police Department sergeant. My role was a person in the film that went from being a criminal to being a police officer.
So how did you all meet?
So it's kind of funny. Having been law enforcement myself, I did 21 years as a police officer, then another 10 at the FBI. I'm watching a video and I see this articulate, bright young man talking. What was that thing called?
TED.
TED Talk. He did a TEDx talk. And I'm watching, and then it said Hamden police officer. Now, I was a Hamden police officer. So I'm like, they didn't have police officers like that when I was on the job. I need to find this young man and work with him because he was able to deliver messaging really powerful. So I reached out to him after watching him on the TED Talk. Didn't know him from a can of paint, but when I did connect with him and told him what I was doing, some of the work that I was doing, he was all in. And then Ameer, it's funny how I met Ameer because I have the Connecticut Hall of Change, and during the Hall of Change, we nominate individuals, or people nominate individuals that have been incarcerated, that have come home and do great things to turn their lives around and to improve the community. So Ameer's name had come up to me several times because he was in the process of helping people get their pardons. He was a sergeant in the New Haven Police Department, and then I found out that he also had been incarcerated himself. And so I reached out to him, and the first time I called him, he basically hung up in my face because he was like, oh, who's this calling me? And we laugh about it today because he asked a few people who I was. I spoke to a few more people, and that's how I met him. And we've been working together. The three of us have been working together along with the rest of the team for about 1.5 years, almost 2 years now.
It was a real pleasure to get a call from a guy like Charlie Grady. Now, I knew of him from circles that I was in, so when I heard he wanted to talk to me, I was curious. And we met over a cup of coffee, and he started telling me about the Connecticut Hall of Change and all the work that he was doing with the FBI, and it was totally in line with my values and what I was currently doing in the police department. So as soon as we met each other and we had an opportunity to work together, it was a really good time.
So I met Charlie, like you said, with the phone call, and I was kind of rude and short with him because of the fact that I usually don't, I'm like stay low key. I really don't talk and things of that nature. And people make promises and they don't come through. He came through. I came to the program, and it's a resource hub, and I'm a resource, and I can help inspire and motivate other people. I met Jeremy through Charlie, so here we are now.
What inspired this film?
So there's a bunch of different actions that inspired the film for me. Basically, having lived in law enforcement, I grew up with 5 uncles who were cops. My father was a deputy chief, a captain in the police department. I grew up in the culture of law enforcement. And I recognized that I was witnessing the decay of the peace officer and seeing more of a soldier police officer. And as I watched that happen, it made me feel that there has to be change because there was too many people getting shot by police officers, and there was the George Floyd thing. There was a whole bunch of other things that came to mind where I wanted to show people that there are good and bad in everything. There's good and bad dentists, there's good and bad doctors, there's good and bad nurses. But when it comes to police officers, nobody wants to hear that there's good and bad. They're either all good or they're all bad. And so for me, having seen a bunch of different actions where police officers were getting sort of crucified for doing their job, and then police officers that weren't doing their job properly, they were getting crucified as well. But one of the things that I really wanted to do in this film was show that at any moment, the good guy, quote unquote, can become the bad guy, and vice versa. At any moment, police officer, trooper, any one of those people can do something that puts them in the bad guy definition. So is there really a good guy and a bad guy? Or is there actions that put someone in trouble, bad choices, and there are people who have a better control on their own actions? Does that make them good? So I really wanted to juxtapose law enforcement culture, and it is a rich culture, compared to what the street culture was, where they both mimic each other in a lot of ways. That's what the motivation was.
My role in the film as a retired law enforcement, I came in talking about peer support and about the culture. One of the conversations that Charlie and I had early on was about policing and policing culture. And when you teach peer support for years, and I was the head of our peer support team at our department, I started to realize a couple things. People have this view of something called the thin blue line or back the blue, and people have this perception that we're all this tight unit. And the reality is that we're not. And a lot of times we come across as that way when times are easy. Somebody has a child, right? Somebody gets married. It's easy to pick behind stuff like that. Even when, tragically somebody gets injured or God forbid they lose their life, we all come together so strong. But if an officer finds himself in a position where maybe there's addiction, there's something going on in the family, there's some tough time that they come across, and sometimes we've seen where an officer has made a really poor choice and gotten themselves arrested, that same brotherhood just disappears. And what I try to train is you don't have to agree with what somebody did. You don't have to sit there and say, I agree with your actions, but I can say, I stand with you. Here is your brother officer. If you got to go to court, you're not going to go to court alone. I'm going to have your back. That's the kind of policing I signed up for. And over my 20 years, I saw more and more and more people just get cast away because people from the culture didn't buy into the decisions that they made or how they handled the situation. And I thought that was rather sad. So I still train in peer support now, and I really try to challenge people to kind of put that aside. And if I'm going to say to my brother officer, I got you, then you got to do it.
So what inspired the film for me was I'm probably the first person in the nation that has gone from convict as deep as I was with 13 felonies to being now a police sergeant. So therefore, it shows a transformation that a lot of people don't believe in. A lot of people still don't believe in it. So that's what inspired it for me. To this day, I get slack, but some people praise me, and the people in the street praise me. Some of the officers praise me. Like again, I get some slack, but to be a motivation and inspiration to some, and to see that I went from here to there, and I'm inspiring other people to do the same thing, that's the inspiration for the movie for me.
Yeah, of course.
I think it's real important to point out that this is law enforcement here. We're not bashing law enforcement, right? What we are doing is talking openly and honestly about the changes that need to happen within the law enforcement culture. We've been around it, we've seen it, I grew up in it, and I watched the shift happen. And so we're at a point now where we really need to be honest, open and honest about policing. I've seen too many great people that I've worked with in my nonprofit, the Connecticut Hall of Change, as well as Hang Time, that were amazing people, but they still had the felony letter on their back that followed them and impeded them in furthering their lives. But I also saw police officers who had done the same things, just didn't get caught, just didn't get turned in, whatever the case is, and they were held at a different standard. They were treated as heroes. So that was another reason why I said, hey, somebody's got to tell the truth about, how alike we are. That title of police officer does not make you a great human. A great human makes a great cop.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's like in an age when a lot of people are saying they're criticizing like the criminal justice system. This one is a little bit different because it's people saying, yes, we're part of the criminal justice system, but we agree with you, and here's some things that we'd like to change about it.
Right. It's plain and simple for us. Again, there's a whole bunch of us that see it the same way, and we have these conversations in silos. But this is the first time we're actually having a conversation openly and outwardly about, hey, this can be done better. Policing can be done better. I don't think we're ever going to satisfy every person in the community's opinion or desire of what police should be. And I don't think that should be the goal. The goal should be to be peace officers and serve the community in a fair and balanced way. And the only way that happens is by hiring people at the start that have been vetted tremendous. Currently, the vetting process for who becomes a police officer, you'd be amazed at how minimal it is in the United States versus other countries. Some countries you have to go through a police academy for 2 years before you ever hit the street. Here in the United States, at most 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's like significantly shorter.
Exactly.
You know, when we talk about where we are currently right now, I know Charlie mentioned early on the George Floyd, which is 5 years past now, but we've just had a recent event as well. And events like this don't surprise me, because somebody who's taught crisis intervention for years, you have to understand how to work in a crisis and how complex human emotions are. When you have the human emotions from one side, whether it's federal law enforcement, local law enforcement, whatever, and then you have a society, we'll call, of protesters, I don't want to call them angry, but like when you have emotionally driven protesters with an emotionally driven cops, and you know, just like we talked about in the movie, when you're like this, it's a very hard time to see each other as human. What I like to see in our training, is how we train law enforcement officers, is not to get drawn in to that raw emotion from society, because we need to be in that role where we could take that step back, take those breaths, try to humanize ourselves. Because if I can control myself, I can help better connect to you. If I can't control myself, I'm never going to be able to connect to you. And that's the basis of any crisis intervention that we talk about. So I think, you know, these things that we see playing out right now in the streets of America, it doesn't surprise me at all. And it's going to continue to happen if we can't just, to your point, humanize people, but peel that onion back a little deeper. How do we do that? And how do we train people? And it is not easy. For somebody who's worked in areas where you're at work for 12, 18, 20 hours, there's video cameras, there's people are being loud, they're screaming and swearing at you. It's very difficult. But giving people skills, you know, getting them in and out through shifts, all those little things that we could possibly do to help prepare better. Because what always gets me in law enforcement is when we act surprised. Like when we act surprised, somebody puts a camera on our face. Why would we be surprised by that? Like most of us wear body cameras. So kind of like getting ourselves into that emotional space, I think would be a real value in law enforcement moving forward.
One of the things I realized early on is that the job was a job. The badge and the gun did not define who I was. I was still me, and I went to work every day. And when the uniform came off, I was still me. The next morning when I put the uniform on, I'm still me. And if you're going into law enforcement, if someone's in law enforcement, and that job, that title, becomes their identity, that's where the problem comes in.
You take a guy, he wants to be a cop, great. But why do you want to be a cop? Because I want to put the bad guys in jail. Shut the up. Everybody wants to be the good guy, even the drug dealers on the street. There is no such thing as the good guys, just the bad guys. There's the right, there's the wrong. Till the world understands that we live in gray, nothing's going to change.
What would happen if we studied policing from the perspective of the community? The line between good guys and bad guys would be a blurred line.
My mother was a prostitute.
My father, to this day, is a crack addict.
I had a lot of opportunities where I could have went the other way.
What drew me was nice cars, the women used to flock over them, and the respect they used to get from the people in the community.
I always hated the police. They were always demeaning, they were always aggressive. And it could be a black cop, and it wouldn't matter. If I got pulled over by a black cop, too, he used to harass us. He's still working to this day.
I didn't experience police like that. I grew up in a predominantly white, upper middle class community.
I've never seen a cop tell another cop, you're wrong.
The good guy versus bad guy mentality is something that starts day one in the academy.
People told me, oh, you're one of the best agents in the New York office, won a bunch of awards, all your cases turn out great. I was an FBI agent who was the us, and I thought there wasn't them.
It's just tribalism. You either have our back or you don't, and any critical dissent means you're the other.
100%, it's us against them. But my question is it really?
The drug dealers that I knew growing up, they were admired.
When I sold drugs, I was a good kid. I never had any trouble with confrontation with people.
There certainly are similarities to gang infrastructure and policing. It's almost ironic, right, that they all kind of follow the same playbook.
When I used to get dressed in the morning, I checked my gun and I was acting like a cop.
Every single day, us versus them. We see them, we go a different way.
Cops are probably the best thing in the world that we have for our protection, if there wasn't no corruption.
As much as we talk about rethinking the police, we need to rethink training.
People have the capacity to change, but given the right opportunity in the right situation.
If every federal law enforcement officer had to spend time in a prison, they could see how you have to adapt to survive. Right and wrong get blurred.
We don't know their circumstance, what led them to selling drugs, shooting.
This is the scene of the crime, if you want to say.
We get up to $50,000, $60,000 a day.
We either have to genuinely be a second chance society or not.
If I didn't go to prison, I don't know if I'd have been a good guy. I don't know if I'd be helping all these people.
For shining a spotlight on the underbelly of some of the toughest communities in the country, told by real people making real change. Because we are way more complex than just black and white. Put your fucking hands up!